Welcome back to another episode of Please Call Me Crazy, brought to you by Free People Radio and powered by our favorite sponsor, TireGet.com. That's TireGet.com. You have to buy tires from somebody. You might as well buy them from us. Help fund the movement, help support the movement. We believe in the freedom of movement, and that's exactly what the establishment wants to take from you now. I'm your host, Royce White, here in the belly of the beast, Minneapolis, Minnesota, and this is episode 209. The day is Wednesday, August 14th, year of our Lord, 2024. Special shout out to the War Room Posse, the great Grace Chong, Maureen Bannon, and of course, our fearless leader, Stephen K. Bannon, who is currently serving an unjust incarceration from lawfare and a kangaroo witch hunt show trial. Shout out to the War Room, shout out to the War Room Posse. First and foremost, I want to say thank you to all the Minnesotans who voted in the primary last night, yesterday. I know there were many of you out there, some 80,000 voters here in the state of Minnesota. I can't tell you how warmed my heart is by your patriotism and your support and your confidence in me to represent you in the United States Senate, which is one of the most important political bodies at one of the most important political times in our nation's history. I think I've earned that and I deserve it, but I'm still very appreciative nonetheless. Um, a lot to go over today. I wanna try and cover a wide variety of things on the back of this victory. One, victory begets victory. And as my mentor and friend Steve Bannon always said, we like elections. We don't have a problem with elections. We're going to win elections. And we won an endorsement because the American people have had a belly full of it. And we just won a primary that nobody believed that we could win because the American people, you out there, have had a belly full of it. And there's a referendum, there's a reckoning coming, and it's you. It's not me. It's not me. I'm just the guy, waving the flag, sounding the alarm, you know, with the microphone. But the reckoning that's coming, the referendum that's here now is you all, the American people. So I want to talk about a few things leading into this primary. One, I can't impress upon people enough how powerful the stranglehold, the vice grip that money and special interest and lobby money has on our American politics. Many of you already know that out there, but I want to cover it again in case winning a United States Senate primary brings more people into the audience who may just be listening to me or be getting familiar with me for the first time. Obviously, the mainstream media has gone out of their way to smear my character and paint me as some crazy extremist, which, I mean, certainly you could go out and find clips of me talking on the podcast and saying things that are colorful. I mean, I would describe it as colorful. In my neighborhood where I come from, it wouldn't even cross over into the characterization of extreme whatsoever. But hey, I mean, we all grew up in different places. It is funny, however, that the Democrats and the liberals claim to know so much about black culture or black communities, yet they think that me saying the word cuck is like too much for public consumption. Um, the mainstream media has gone out of their way to smear my character, and that is one of the sole sources, one of the greatest sources of the way that money has a stranglehold on our politics. And I'll break it down for you from a campaign standpoint. We win the endorsement. I filed to run for United States Senate. We win an endorsement. From the endorsement in the middle of May up until last night, the struggle is not my message or platform, which gets incredible feedback and support no matter where I go, whether it's a 100-person town hall, whether it's to talk with a couple interested party officers, or whether it's in front of a state delegation of 1,200 Republicans. The message and the platform and the delivery gets good reviews no matter where I go. The trouble is getting to all the people who vote or need to vote. And we'll talk about that in a moment. So that's the trouble. The question is how to get to everyone. And here in Minnesota, I mean, we have a really big state. Minnesota is not a small state by any means. It's a big state, and there's a lot of people that live here. Not a crazy amount of people, but there's a decent amount of people that live across a big piece of land. So the question is how to get the message to those people. What the mainstream media has created all across this country is a mechanism to get misinformation and lies to those people. How do they do it? Newspapers, big newspapers that then get, let's say, whittled down, or the information gets trickled down to smaller local newspapers. The same with your news. You know, your big media outlets and news companies trickle down to your more regional news companies, and then on down to your local news stations, and then even further down to local radio stations, and so on and so forth. So, the mainstream media, the media monopoly, the media industrial complex has a vice grip, a stranglehold on information in our country, and it has huge consequences in our elections. And this entire attack on me from the beginning, from the day that I won the endorsement. Remember, before I won the endorsement, nobody was even paying attention to me being in this Senate race, which is odd. I mean, it's peculiar because most of the time, if you get a professional athlete, a former professional athlete who has name recognition, it's one of the first huge hurdles for any politician, especially one running for a statewide office or any big office in the election cycle, in federal offices, even a congressional district office would, name recognition is a hurdle that all politicians and candidates must face. So if you have somebody who was in the public eye for whatever reason, but particularly sports, which is greatly coveted in American culture, usually that would garner some media attention. Mine had zero. I mean, radio silence about my candidacy until I won the endorsement. And once I won the endorsement, the attacks came in waves, in droves, and the scary part isn't so much that they attacked me, it's what they tried to attack me on. And I'll go over that here just to get us started. But I use that as an example to try and illustrate there's a gap here between the America First candidates, the MAGA candidates, or let's say party movement affiliation aside, any genuine candidate that wants to reach the citizens in a constituency. There's a gap there. There's a barrier there, and that barrier has been intentionally placed there. And we're going to talk about that more in a moment. But I want to start off with these attacks. Let's just go right down the list, because now that I've won this primary, I'm seeing the same attacks recycled again. Like we didn't already go through this, or I haven't even I haven't already addressed these things. Let's just go through the list real quick here. Let me give you the cliff notes. Okay, number one, back child support. I've gone over it a million times. It feels like probably not a million. That's obviously an exaggeration, but I've gone over it a number of times. We've written Substacks about. I've written a Substack. I wrote a Substack about the family court back when I ran for Congress in 2022 because it was the same family court then that it is today. And unless we get some better people in office, that ain't changing. But the family court situation and my back child support, a lot of these liberals are, I don't know, poor shaming me, calling me a deadbeat dad because I have child support arrears. And I've explained on a number of occasions that I was court ordered to pay child support at an MBA salary. And it was an MBA salary that I was no longer making. After I was no longer in the MBA or receiving paychecks from the MBA, a judge, a family court magistrate or referee, as they call it, made the determination that I was still responsible for MBA salary based child support because I had the potential to make that much money. Now, anybody who thinks that that's just, well, we got a problem with the way you view American citizenship and the law and the court to start. We don't even have to go any further. You have a real crisis of the idea of justice. There's nothing fair or just about making somebody responsible for a salary that they're not making. I mean, talk about slapping the American working class citizen right in the face. Talk about slapping American fathers right in the face. I get it. If you have a job and you make a certain amount of money and a family court says, hey, look, you make this amount of money, you're obligated to give this percentage of that income to your child, perfectly fair and fine. But if you are court ordered to pay child support based on a salary that you don't make and have a court say that or determine that you have the potential to make that much money, especially when it's a profession as rarefied as the NBA. I mean, it couldn't get any more disanchored from reality than that. And it is a signal of how rotten our court system has become. And it's not lost on me, and it shouldn't be lost on many of you either, that there's a corollary between the absurdity of that situation in the family court and the highest levels of lawfare that are being waged against an American hero like Steve Bannon. It's all fruit from the same poisonous tree. But again, I was court ordered to pay child support based on an MBA salary that I was no longer making. There is nothing fair or just about that whatsoever. Next thing, my FEC campaign expenditure filings were done improperly. Okay. When you run a campaign for the first time, hopefully some of you out there, concerned citizens, will pick up the mantle and decide to do. You obviously don't know anything about campaign finance. Hell, most American citizens don't know anything about basic finance laws, let alone campaign finance laws. So you rely on professionals who have some level of experience or expertise in that field to do a lot of that work for you, which is exactly what I did. I had a campaign treasurer, I had a campaign manager, I had campaign digital guy, and sort of a general consultant, and these people were involved in overseeing the accounting of my campaign. And at the end, the filings weren't filed properly. And anybody could see that. I mean, anybody who, all these campaign experts they went and got to say, well, these campaign filings are criminal. I mean, they're trying to rev up or ratchet up the same rhetoric that they're doing to Donald Trump at a smaller scale to me. And so this could be criminal. There's nothing criminal about it. My treasurer didn't file the campaign filings correctly. It's not my fault. That's not on me. In fact, when you're a treasurer, you sign you sign up to be a treasurer, taking on the responsibility of that financial portion of the campaign. So the fact that those filings were incorrect, first of all, I wouldn't know where to begin to file them. Really, some candidates actually uh, do their own treasure work and campaign filings, but usually for very small campaigns, because if you raise the hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars you would need to be competitive in many of these federal races, you wouldn't be able to campaign if you had to do the campaign finance part. You wouldn't have the time. So anyway, those campaign filings were amended. We amended the filings. We hired a team. We amended the filings. We put in the necessary information, and we're dealing with the FEC, as we need to. I mean, we're not hiding from the FEC. Everything that we did in that campaign was above board, and now the FEC amendments reflect that. And one of them, for example, the Daily Beast, which is a far left rag and another part, very blatant part of the political bent of this media industrial complex. The Daily Beast said, "Oh, there's $100,000 in wires and checks that are mysterious. This is mysterious wires and checks, basically trying to insinuate that the Negro stole money from the campaign and used it for personal reasons." And after we amended the reports, the FEC reports, every single penny of those wires and checks were accounted for with bank receipts or bank paperwork or wire transfer documents and check documents that the bank keeps. And we were able to look at every single vendor that was paid out of the campaign with wires and checks, and all of it was campaign related. Not one mainstream media outlet has come out to amend what the Daily Beast had said, which a lot of other mainstream media outlets piggybacked off of. Not one of them have come out to amend that story. Not one of them have come out to say that these reports were amended and that the $100,000 in wires and checks were accounted for. And why do you think that is? Of course, their whole goal from the beginning was to try and smear me. They didn't care what the truth was. Any political campaign finance expert worth their salt could look at those reports from the outset and say, somebody just didn't file these reports the right way. And nobody who was uh, no journalist with integrity would have moved forward with that story without calling the candidate or somebody else around the campaign for comment. They didn't call. And when the Daily Beast did call me, I said, "You guys are grasping at straws." And then they just lobbed allegations and accusations at me directly over the phone. They said, "Oh, you're lying." Okay, well, look at the reports now. In fact, when I did an interview with the local news station KTSP, and Tom Hauser, I brought him the the statements of the wires and checks, or I think it was just the wire transfers on that day. But I brought him a packet, a folder of about $60,000 worth of wire transfers, and and who the vendors were from the directly from the bank. Did he go back and do a story to amend? No, this is how the media works. This is how the media is actually controlling the misinformation that the American voter and American citizen gets. Moving right along, the FEC stuff. And then they say, oh, well, what about the $1,200 at the strip club? And let's talk about this. I mean, this is a really interesting one. I mean, I can't tell you how strange it is for a political movement as culturally perverse as the left and progressives have become to try and lob some moral or ethical allegation at me for being a grown man who would go to a strip club on face value from the outset. I mean, these people are openly admitting that they see no problem whatsoever putting boundaries between adults and children in a sexually explicit way. So I don't even know where they get off judging, which is why I'm kind of flippant when one of these leftist rags asked me about the $1,200, not 5,000, not 10,000, $1,200 at a strip club. I'm like, are you kidding me? It's like I don't let Satanists question my morality or ethics around being Christian because you guys are mocking Christ. So I don't view your line of questioning as legitimate. But just for the record's sake, people have access to campaign cards. People make personal charges on their campaign all the time, and they reimburse those charges. It happens every single election cycle with every single campaign. If you don't believe that, go ahead and call the FEC up yourself and ask them. It happens every single campaign, up and down the board, from presidential all the way down to, I don't know, county commissioner. It happens. Now, what's supposed to occur is, let's say you make a personal charge on your campaign for whatever reason. Maybe I'm out of town and I lost my credit card and I have to, purchase something for some reason, and that's just how the chips fell. Um, your campaign treasurer would usually do an audit or look over those charges and say, "Hey, you got a charge here. It looks personal. You need to reimburse that, or would you like to reimburse that?" And it would never even make it on your FEC report. It happens all the time because the money was reimbursed. No need to talk about it. The FEC doesn't really care. I mean, I'm just telling you what the real cultural practice is of American political campaigns. Anybody who wants to deny that, please step forth and tell me. Okay, um, that's how it goes. So the night in question where they say that we spent money at this strip club, and I went on David Pakman and I said, "Look, there's food at the strip club. We spent $1,200 on a food tab at the strip club. That's just what it is. I don't know if anybody else is unfamiliar with this, but where I come from in my community, at 1 a.m., the only place to get good food usually is at the strip club. I mean, you can say that that's, immoral or, not conservative or whatever you want to say, but I know there's a lot of Wall Street bankers, okay, Wall Street stock guys who spend a lot of company money or company credit cards or use a lot of company credit cards on adult entertainment after dark. That's just the truth of it. And I would venture to guess that K Street is probably very similar. If you don't know, that's the sort of the legal cadre of Washington, D.C., and we're going to clean that place out when I get there. But the point is, this is a common practice. It's not strange. It's not odd. What's odd is that my campaign, or they never had a chance to have those charges reimbursed because we didn't have our filings done properly. Or let's say we didn't even have a proper accounting of those expenditures. Okay. Now, the other piece that I've said, but I guess gets looked over is um, we actually attempted in that situation to reverse the charges from that establishment and put them on a personal card, but they couldn't do it for whatever reason. That's their decision as an establishment, as a business. If they don't want to reverse charges and switch cards, then they get to decide that. But the point of the matter is that the money was spent on food, and the media tried to make it seem like I spent the money personally on strippers. I mean, it went so far, and if you're not familiar with this, this went so far as to be on MSNBC, the Daily Show, I think, with Ronnie Chang and Trevor Noah and that whole crew. I think they're doing the Daily Show now. It's the Daily Show, right? It's the Daily Show, I think, right? Yeah, the Daily Show that Jon Stewart, created. Um, and so they made a huge joke about it, like, well, nobody eats food at the strip club. What are y'all talking about? You people stupid? Absolutely, people do. 100,000% they do. Maybe you, um, let's call it squares out there don't, which is so strange to me because, again, you have a liberal establishment, a liberal mainstream media establishment that always pretends to be so in tune with the culture and black communities, yet you don't know that black folks eat food at the strip clubs all the time. And not just black men, black women. I know plenty of women that I grew up with that are around my age that will go down to the strip club and eat at the strip. I mean, this is just common. Now you could laugh or you could say whatever you want, but show me some black folks who aren't familiar with this. Maybe they're not. I mean, but you can find some black folks in every city across this country who are familiar with this cultural practice, which is why they're so afraid of me because I'm not just black. I come from the exact neighborhood that they have monopolized and brainwashed and tried to mislead politically. They know that I'm actually and actually me eating food at the strip club at 1 a.m. or getting food to eat from the strip club at 1 a.m. signals that I'm actually in touch with the neighborhoods that we need to go change. I digress. So, that whole scam and narrative about the campaign finance, they're going to try and use that until the cows come home, but there's no legs to it whatsoever. It's complete bullshit. Next narrative. And there's only four. I'm getting there. We're getting to the end here. Next narrative is Black Lives Matter and George Floyd. Oh, this is a sneaky one. Oh, this is a very, very sneaky narrative they're trying to run. As if the Star Tribune, which is by all means a communist newspaper, which is why last night they had a Star Tribune photographer there and they were going to write a story. And I told them, no Star Tribune, no communists. And, one of the Star Tribune editors or somebody wrote on social media, and, well, Royce kicked out our photographer, so I guess if he wins the primary tonight, then he's not going to have his face on the front page. Like, as if I give a fuck. I don't care about having my face on the front page of the Star Tribune. I've had my face on the front page of the Star Tribune since I was some 16, 17 years old. I remember us winning the state championship at Hopkins High School, going 31-0, the only team to do it in the modern class era of Minnesota high school basketball. And my face was right there on the front page of the Star Tribune at 18. You've been there once, you've been there a million times. Who cares? What does it matter? Our country is dying. Our country is dying. Our citizenship is going bankrupt. And I need to, what? See, but in their mind, they actually live in this world where they believe that all of their politicians are strange if they're not doing it for personal gain and gratification. So when they encounter somebody who's actually doing it for the reason they say, they don't know how to deal with it. They don't know how to comprehend that. They're like, he doesn't want his face on the front page of the paper. They're like offended. No, I don't. Your newspaper's communist. You lie about me every single week because you're that afraid that I'm a real threat to Amy Klobuchar, and even furthermore, to the prevailing permanent political class in this country and their status quo. But we'll talk about that in a moment. The point I'm making is, does anybody out there really believe that the Star Tribune is characterizing me as a Black Lives Matter protester because they think it's going to lose me votes in the Twin Cities metro area? Honestly, just ask yourself that question. I mean, I can show you how to do the thought experiment to easily understand how corrupt the mainstream media has become, and you should never trust them. And I only say it because there's a lot of people who still do trust them. Now, there's a growing amount of people who don't. And praise be to God for that, because Lord knows this country needs an awakening from the mainstream media brainwashing. However, there are people who still read those headlines, come across their phone, and Apple News will send you a headline, and people take it for, they take it as gospel. Let's just be honest. Or let's say they form casual opinions about it that then affect how they live, how they think, how they act. Okay. The Star Tribune or any of these other mainstream media industrial complex outlets and publications are not saying I'm a Black Lives Matter protester because they think it will lose me votes in the inner cities of Minneapolis or St. Paul. They're saying it for the conservatives. And you watch now how the way the mainstream media paints me is going to shift significantly. We're going to show you. That's going to be a cornerstone of the next 90 days in this Senate campaign. We are going to show you the pivot of the mainstream, not as if you already don't see it. I mean, they all said Joe Biden was competent and fit to run for office, and at the drop of a dime, they switched and said he wasn't, and Kamala Harris is so likable. When we all know she was never likable. She was the bottom polling candidate in the 2020 presidential election cycle on the Democrat side. Nobody liked her. Okay. I mean, nobody. In fact, Amy Klobuchar was one of the top polling amongst the bottom. She polled at around 6%. Kamala Harris was at 1%. Somehow Kamala Harris gets the nod, huh? Okay, fine. You're going to try and lie to us and tell us we all like Kamala and the cackling laugh? Okay. I mean, let's see how it works out for you. You can try it. My point is, watch them pivot. It's going to be trying to, let's say, smear my character for Republican primary voters who have an emotional investment in the George Floyd story here in Minnesota, to now saying that Royce is a misogynist and a homophobe. See, because that narrative doesn't really work with the Republican primary voters. And they meant to railroad me in the primary, but I'm a little tougher to kill than they assumed. Or let's say the people are a little wiser than they assume. And that is the hallmark of this establishment. They think you all are stupid. I've said it before, and I'll keep saying it until it really clicks. The real crime, the real corruption of this establishment is they think you all are dumb. They're counting on you being stupid. The Republicans are who they went after with the mainstream media up until now. Watch them pivot. And I say that because I want to talk about this. This is maybe one of the most important issues in American politics. Maybe one of the most important issues in America writ large. George Floyd, Black Lives Matter. Uh, if anybody out there thinks that we're going to save this country without working class blacks and Hispanics, you're lying to yourself. You're lying to yourself at a level where I question the overall integrity of what you're saying in the first place, meaning I don't believe you actually want to save the country. If you think we're going to save the country without working class blacks and Hispanics, you are lying to yourself. And if you have the good fortune and blessing, the good privilege to be able to speak to a broad audience of American citizens, and you're telling them that we're going to save this country without the black and Hispanic working class, you're lying to them too. And that was my primary opponent, Joe Frazier. Just saying, we were in a debate. Alpha News streamed it. You can go find it online. I'm sorry, there was a debate. Yeah, Alpha News streamed it, and my Senate opponent, Joe Frazier, says I'm concerned about the suburbs. I'm concerned with the suburbs. The suburbs are going to be my focus. We need the suburbs. Okay. Well, it just so happens that the edifice of the liberal movement and worldview happens to come from the suburbs, doesn't come from down in the city. Your Marxist and communist professors, your liberal professors, your progressive professors and thought leaders do not live down in Minneapolis on the north side or on the south side. They live in the affluent suburban area. Okay? That's the reality. So if you think that you're going to change the worldview and mindset of genuine scholarly ideologues, be my guest. Be my guest. But what I'm going to do is follow the lead of let's say a Steve Bannon and go down and ask those working class single mothers in North Minneapolis how they're doing with their groceries. And if you see recently on MSNBC, they covered some young some black women there in the city of Philadelphia who say inflation is killing them. And what does that have to do with George Floyd? My point is, if you think that everybody who put on a Black Lives Matter t-shirt was a part of the organization, then you are an idiot. Sorry to say it. I can't put it any more blunt than that. Everybody who put on a Black Lives Matter t-shirt wasn't a part of that organization, wasn't a part of their official organization. Everybody who put on a Black Lives Matter t-shirt doesn't understand the political agenda of that organization. They don't understand the roots. They don't understand the power broker, the deals that go on at certain levels between Black Lives Matter and, let's say, the George Soros Foundation. I could go down into the city and ask your average, 18-year-old black man, young black man, does he know what Black Lives Matter is? And he may reference or cite police brutality. And he may reference or cite issues with policing or distrust of police and government. And then I ask him who George Soros is, and he'll have no fucking clue. Okay. So they don't necessarily understand how that whole thing pieces together, which is a good thing. That presents an opportunity. It's an opportunity that I tried to take advantage of, and I don't say take advantage in a nefarious way. I mean, I tried to, let's say, I don't want to say capitalize on that. That wouldn't be the right word. That I tried to lean into. I threw myself into. I just threw myself into the belly of the beast after George Floyd died, and I had this internal dialogue where I thought, police brutality seems to be the biggest political focus of the broad American population. Let's try and educate people on issues that are much broader, much more important, have much bigger implications on their daily life, like the Federal Reserve. And my opponent, Joe Frazier, constantly tried to uh, uh, smear me uh, uh, in the Republican Party and across conservative Minnesota by making the claim that I was a Black Lives Matter rioter. Although, if you go and read the liberal media from 2020, it will literally explain how I led peaceful protests after George Floyd died. Peaceful. It also explains how I led protests independent of the Minneapolis or Minnesota Black Lives Matter organization through another organization that I started myself with other black athletes in the community called the 10K Foundation. Now, all of this is right there for you to read, yet the mainstream media says it for the casual reader who votes Republican, hoping that they won't pay close enough attention, so emotionally moved by the three words Black Lives Matter. And then for your Joe Frazier's, he's going to take it a step further on their behalf and say, Royce burned the city down. No. Royce and some other young black men who think for ourselves and believe in being leaders saw a very good opportunity, a necessary a necessary moment in our community to go and demonstrate how citizens should actually behave, even if they have a gripe or a grievance. And that's exactly what we did. And over the course of about 10 protests that I led peacefully downtown Minneapolis, there wasn't a single fire, there wasn't a single fight, there wasn't a single arrest. Now, why did the mainstream media not cover that extensively? You got to ask yourself these questions. What would make the mainstream media, let's say, gun shy in covering peaceful protests and demonstrations at the epicenter of American political culture after George Floyd died? Well, I'll give you the answer. The answer is the Federal Reserve and the way that the money works is what the mainstream media is there to protect. Understand that the mainstream media doesn't give a shit about black people. It doesn't give a shit about white people. It doesn't give a shit about cops or citizens. It doesn't give a shit about doctors or anything. The mainstream media is there solely to protect the distraction to, let's say, now I don't say protect, to create. The mainstream media is there to create and sustain the distraction away from how the money works. So as soon as I led 10 peaceful protests downtown Minneapolis to the Minneapolis Federal Reserve, it sent up red flags all across the media. But you wouldn't see that because they're not going to tell you. The mainstream media is not going to send out a memo that reads, there's a Negro down in Minneapolis who thinks that he's smart, who fancies himself intelligent and wants to educate people on the way that the money works in this country and inflation, like the black women in Philadelphia are talking about now. In fact, the Republicans often talk about inflation and the price of goods and the cost of living. And yet, I think I may be one of the only politicians who can say that I led a protest or march on the Federal Reserve with over 10,000 people. I might be the only one in the country. And I'm not patting myself on the back. I'm just showing you all the stuff that they won't say in the mainstream media. All the stuff that Joe Frazier's and my detractors in the Republican Party won't mention when they talk about me. See, because those things have real weight. They have real historical weight. They have real political weight. They have real cultural weight. Line me up the politicians who have ever led a peaceful yet well-attended protest or march to the Federal Reserve. Show me them. Go ahead and Google it. Just Google it. American politicians that marched on the Fed. See what comes up. I guarantee you my name probably won't come up, but I guarantee you won't find many others as well. And maybe there are some others who have been kept hidden from me, but I can't name any. If there was one who may have done something like that, or Rand Paul or Ron Paul probably would be in that camp, but it's few and far between. And my point is, again, going forward, there is a chance. There is a chance right now in American politics to redefine American politics. But first, we have to redefine the conservative movement and the Republican Party. We have to redefine our platform, not away from the morals and principles, but expand and add more nuance. A nuance that has been left out intentionally by my measure. That's my opinion. Could be wrong. Maybe people are just incompetent, quote unquote. Maybe people have just overlooked this particular strategy, but I tend to think that people are intentionally not talking about the things that need to be discussed, not talking about the issues that would actually expand the party in a way that's genuine and in alignment with republicanism. What is republicanism? Self-governance, freedom to assemble, freedom of speech. Okay? We need black people and Hispanics and minorities in this country. We want them in the party. There's a pitch for them to come into the party. There's a way to discuss these issues that would allow them into the party, like going into the belly of the beast, Minneapolis, which is now again going to become the cultural epicenter of the political divide in this country and talk about inflation. But you can't talk about inflation downstream. You got to talk about inflation upstream. You got to talk about inflation at the headwaters. You got to talk about inflation where inflation actually stems from. And that would be the Federal Reserve. That would be government policy, monetary policy. Now, the reason why your Republicans tend not to want to talk about monetary policy and economic policy, even though they complain about inflation, is because you can't talk about inflation without talking about the military-industrial complex. And none of your mainstream conservatives or Republicans really want to talk about the military-industrial complex. It's an issue that is considered off limits, which is why they go and get a 26-year naval officer, military intelligence shill for the military-industrial complex, like Joe Frazier, Ukraine Joe, to take all the focus away from the Black Lives Matter protest, quote unquote. Take all the focus away from the fact that down there in Minneapolis, there was a group of black men who rejected the political emphasis and priority of Black Lives Matter and wanted to educate people about inflation, which is actually the path forward to victory right now. Ain't it funny how that all works? Ain't it funny how shit shakes out? You start to see things very, very clearly. The lines start to be drawn very clearly. The clear line is, oh, there's some people in this political in this permanent political class, even on the Republican side, who really don't want what they say they want. First and foremost, to win. They are willing to sacrifice winning in order to uphold some cultural divisions. And I'm not going to say it's racism. I'm not going to say it's classism. I'm going to say it's globalism. So they don't like Negroes who talk like that. You know, globalism is a dog whistle for anti-Semitism. I'm gonna get to that one in a moment, because that is the fourth and final, character smear that they've used ad nauseum. But let's stay on this thread right here. All of you conservatives out there in the state, all of you conservatives out there anywhere in the country, let's be clear. You have Bibles, you have constitutions. Those are two of the most profound documents in the history of human civilization. The value they add to people's lives can't really be refuted, can't be debated, can't be contested. If so, America and Christianity would not be where they are here in this country and all around the world. The Bible and the Constitution add value to people's lives. They add value to people's spirit. So in the event that your Marxist and communist enemies, and they are your enemies, in the event that your Marxist and communist enemies try and leech on to a revolution, which shouldn't shock us by now, it's right there in the Communist Manifesto. The Marxist ideology is trained to latch on to any revolution that it can, any revolutionary movement that it can. This shouldn't shock us. So in the event that your Marxist and communist enemies latch on to the death of George Floyd, and now the entire, inner city population is circling around a place like Minneapolis, why didn't you go in with your Bibles and constitutions and rebuke and refute? Oh, don't worry, I'll wait. Good thing about the podcast is we take our time. We takes our time on the Please Call Me Crazy podcast. Let me make sure that this is tight enough. Tell me where you were. I'll wait. With your criticisms. Where were you? Tell me. City caught on fire, black businesses burning down, black people, quote unquote, again. We know a lot of people who were doing the looting and rioting and setting fires, a lot of white liberals and black Antifa, a lot of Antifa down there in the city of Minneapolis. So much Antifa, in fact, I vaguely remember in the south side of Minneapolis, down there on 38th Street, it's a notorious neighborhood that's been run by the street gang, the Bloods, for a long time. I grew up in Minneapolis, so I know that. Uh, I'm familiar with that. I'm familiar with the neighborhood. And I distinctly remember that a bunch of young, you know, kids, basically kids, 18 to 21-year-old kids, trying to burn down that block. And the Bloods street gang were actually protecting the liquor store in that neighborhood. I'm not even going to say the names, but I know the names. I know who these people were. I know them by name because I'm from the neighborhood. I actually remember people standing in the doorway of the liquor store, uh, getting into fights with people who were trying to tear and burn down that business. Now, that doesn't get reported on the news. That doesn't get reported with your mainstream media. That doesn't get circulated in the Republican Party or the conservative movement, because we like to talk about things in these sort of bombastic, embellished terms. Am I saying that the south side of Minneapolis didn't burn? No, of course it did. But we can't make a generalization of everybody who was there. What about those people? What about those people who obviously didn't agree with burning down our own businesses? Where do they fall in your equation? They're just clumped in with the rest. Huh? Minneapolis was burnt. And yes, Governor Tim Walz was in charge. And yes, Governor Tim Walz is a shill. And yes, Governor Tim Walz may very well have been okay with a black community burning down their own shit. And that's something that we're going to talk about going forward here, since he got the VP pick nomination. Okay. That is who Governor Tim Walz is. And it's kind of it's kind of a perfect paragon, a perfect example of what the liberal edifice is in this country. The self-destruction of the black community, the self-implosion of the black community, the self-implosion of the black citizen, the self-destruction of the black citizen. Common. It almost seems like it's baked into their plan, isn't it? But there's somebody in this whole equation that has a sort of, let's say, a civic duty, if not a spiritual duty, to combat that type of evil and corruption. And that would be us. That would be us Christians and conservatives. It would be on us to go down into the belly of the beast and spread the gospel and spread the value of citizenship. Oh, they don't like it when I talk like this. Now, when I go around the state, and I've been going around the state and talking to Republicans all across Minnesota, they get it. They're in agreement. That as soon as I say it, it clicks. And I hope the same thing happens, because if it does, we have a chance right now to heal a cultural divide that's been intentionally placed to save this republic, if we have the courage. But the courage is right along this line. Is right along this sort of sensitive cultural line right here. It was on us. It was our duty as Christians. It was our duty as conservatives, as patriots, to understand when Marxists and communists have taken hold of a community that's a part of our broader American community, and go in and combat that. But we didn't. We didn't combat it in our universities. We didn't combat it in the bar associations, in the legal industry. We didn't combat it in our corporations. We didn't combat it in our schools. We haven't even combated it in our churches. But we claim to be conservative. Man, you start to realize that the conservative movement is the controlled opposition. Not to say that the principles and the morals and the ideas aren't right, but when you talk when you talk about actual application, where are we? Well, what are we doing? What are we actually going to do about this? See, there's some of us that are real American badasses. Like, I'd go into a crowd of 100 Marxists without a single fear, without a single shred of fear. 100 Marxists, line them up. I'll roll right in there, knock them over like bowling pins. with righteousness, righteous indignation. And a lot of us Christians and conservatives out there forget that in the Bible, there's such thing as righteous anger. Line them up, 100 Marxists. In fact, you get 10,000 Marxists outside U.S. Bank Stadium, and you lead them down to the Minneapolis Federal Reserve. And if you have enough courage, if you're brave enough, you can even get 10,000 Marxists to bow their heads or remain silent while the leaders pray. Marxist communism, antithetical to Christianity. Karl Marx, Satanist. If you don't think so, you might be brainwashed by Karl Marx and Marxism. That'd be a good starting place. But even if you're not familiar with the history, you can go back and uncover Karl Marx's early poetry, which often cited the story of Faust and his obsession with the character, demonic being, Mephistopheles. Yeah, Karl Marx had a Mephistophelian obsession. He was obsessed with the character Mephistopheles, who was a demon, okay? And I mean a strange obsession. I mean, when you actually go back and listen to the way that Marx talked about Mephistopheles and this sort of demonic end game of trying to, let's say, destroy existence itself. Not just a nihilism, not just an indifference about existence or a resentment of existence, but an anti-existence worldview, which obviously ends up being an anti-human worldview. My point is, we as Christians and as conservatives, and American patriots, we know the communists and Satanists are taking over. We see it. We talk about it all the time. We talk about it. But who's going to actually go into the belly of the beast? Who's actually going to go down into Minneapolis and say, do you realize that you have been brainwashed by a European philosopher? Do you realize that you all are screaming about white supremacy, but you live under the political ideology of a German European philosopher? It seems like it'd be a quite simple thing to debunk unless you had some vested interest to uphold the brainwashing. And it just so happens there is a vested interest to uphold the brainwashing. It's called opposition and controlled opposition. And if you get the two clicking at just the right frequency, you can uphold the scam of stealing everybody's money in perpetuity. A lot of people don't like that. And that's why they're afraid of my candidacy. Because I don't have any vested interest in upholding the scam of the status quo where they steal your money while telling you to hate each other. I don't have a vested interest in that. I have zero interest in that, as a matter of fact. There's nothing about that appeals to me whatsoever. And they know the candidates. They know the candidates who don't really have an interest in that. They can sniff you out right away. Good example. Here's a litmus test for if you can be bought. You know, at 21 years old, when you take a stand against a multi-billion-dollar corporation, a multi-billion-dollar global corporation like the National Basketball Association, when you take a stand on principle and say you can keep the money, but the mental health topic, the human condition, the psychological well-being of our athletes, but our community, the NBA community, and even more so, the American community, and even furthermore, the global community, the mental health topic has to be spoken about and dealt with in earnest and good faith, or else I don't even really want to play. This is much more important than basketball. When they offer a young man like that a couple $100 million to keep his mouth shut and go along with the program anyway, and he says no, that's a good indication that you can't be bought. So my name was already on the list. Y'all are just waking up to it. Joe Frazier, At 21 years old, Joe Frazier would never turn down a couple $100 million on principle. He can't even turn down the $60,000 that they raise in his campaign on principle now to try and run some sacrificial grift Senate campaign. He won't even turn down the money on principle now, let alone when he was 21 years old, and has one mainstream media outlet acknowledged the pivotal role I played in trailblazing for the mental health topic. Has one mainstream media outlet mentioned it. So even more corrupt, mainstream media outlets that actually acknowledged it when it happened. But when they go back and tell you my personal flaws, when they paint my backstory, they never mention it anymore, as if it's insignificant. Ain't that strange to anybody out there? The last thing they want you all to remember is that I had an opportunity to sell out early on in life at a time when most people don't have don't have their spirit together enough to turn down that type of opportunity. And I'm not knocking anybody out there. I understand. When you're 21 years old, you're still trying to figure life out. It's hard for people to turn down fame and fortune, and power at 21 years old. It's damn hard. I get that. I'm not passing judgment. I am going to tell you about me. I am going to remind you who I am. I'm one of those rare unicorns, okay, that actually would turn down $200 million, $100 million, could have been $300 million, endorsements included. Who knows? Turn down millions and millions of dollars on principle. I'm actually that guy. That's the last thing they want you all to realize. That's the last thing they want you to remember. But we are going to remind you. See, the one thing that we're going to do in politics is not shy away from bringing people back to reality. There are men and there are women. Reality. There are elites. There are poor. Reality. There are people who will sell you out, and there are people who can't be bought. Reality. This is what scares them about my candidacy. They will try anything possible, anything they can possibly do to distract you from that reality. That despite what you think, despite how tainted you may feel about American politics and the political theater that's put on in this country every 2 to 4 years and really every 24 hours, despite how tainted you may be by your experience with American politics, your disappointment with American politicians, despite that, there are a few politicians out there who would represent you and not sell out. And you're looking at one of them. But they don't want to mention that. Fine. Okay, good. Well, let me tell you what we're going to do. We're going to get all you conservatives and Republicans together now who complain that the inner city is the bane of our existence and the source of America's problems. And we're going to bring you down into the city. We're going to let you speak to the inner city young people just about just how valuable the ideals and core beliefs of this party and this movement are. And you should feel damn proud to do it. You should be excited. You get to go save a life. You get to go save a soul. You get to go save a life and a soul. You should be elated if you're a Christian, if you're a patriot. See, because nothing gets me more excited. As soon as I started this campaign, I saw this day when I would win a U.S. Senate primary and be going up against a 3-term incumbent where the fate of the election may rest right there in the community that I was born and raised in. And I got a chance to go back in to the community and educate the people who helped raise me about issues that they may not understand. I mean, that really gets me going in the morning. Woo, that gets me going. Does it get you going? Does it get you fired up? If it doesn't get you fired up, I don't want to hear your fucking complaints about how the country's dying. Yeah. When Steve Bannon says, I have to ask myself, what is my task? What is my purpose? If my answer is to save my country, then this country will be saved. I'm that guy. I'm actually that guy. Some people out there, you're not really that guy. You got to look in the mirror. You got to do some soul searching. You got to go find you a mirror, your favorite mirror in the house. I don't know where it is. Maybe it's your bathroom. Maybe it's your kitchen. Maybe you got a vanity in your bedroom, or maybe you got one of those fancy hallway mirrors. I don't know where you do your soul gazing, but you need to go find you a mirror and you need to go look deep, deep, deep down in yourself and ask yourself, what is my task? What is my purpose? If that answer is to save my country, then this country will be saved. I already had that revelation. I already had those moments. I already had those discussions. That's how you lead 10,000 Marxists and atheists to the Federal Reserve in the first place. That's how you get the communists and the Marxists and the atheists and the far left progressives to bow their heads for prayer in the first place. To respect the national anthem in the first place. And while I'm at it, not only is there not many Republican candidates who ever led a march or a protest to the Federal Reserve, name me one who's been able to get 10,000 communists, atheists, Marxists, and leftists to bow their head and pray. I'll wait. Show me a Christian leader. Show me one of these Christian leaders that's gone into the belly of the beast and been able to get tens of thousands of Marxists and communists and progressives to bow their heads and pray. Now, I'm not saying they were praying, because when you bow your head in silence, I'm not there for the dialogue that happens between you and God, but you're going to respect my prayer. That I can guarantee. You're going to respect while I pray. You're going to respect while these other black men up here pray. I guarantee you that. Or we're going to have a fucking problem out here. That's the kind of leadership they don't want in this country. That's the kind of brash, American, smash mouth, nationalist, populist, ultra MAGA energy they don't want in the well of the United States Senate. They don't want that real leadership to emerge in this country. And that's why when I led them to the Fed then, the mainstream media on the left tried their hardest to quiet the excitement around that organization, the 10K Foundation. There was a lot of grassroots excitement about this newly formed, organized group that had a way with branding, and the protests were always peaceful, and people left feeling uplifted and that they had learned something, much like people leave the podcast feeling like they've learned something, like when I go and speak to Republicans and you have 70-year-old men and women, 70-year-old white men and women. There's nothing wrong with being white. There's nothing wrong with being black. You're not European. I'm not African. We're American. We bleed red, white, and blue, first and foremost now, more than any other time in history. But I'm going out and speaking to rural Minnesotans who are 70 plus years old, and they're white, and they're saying, I left feeling good because I learned something. When Royce speaks, I'm actually learning. Well, that's the same thing that happened down there in Minneapolis. But some Republicans see it as I don't know, as a smear on my character. Or are you just afraid? Or were you just hiding? Let's talk for real. And we gotta get this is that pep rally. This is that pep talk we gotta have in the back before we go out here and smash helmet to helmet. We gotta have this pep talk. We gotta soul search. We gotta do some gut checking. I hate to be the one to do it. You know, I am so grateful and appreciative, but the reality, and I'll talk about this in a moment, I still got to get to anti-Semitism, and then I got a campaign meeting I got to get to here, because we're going full tilt, and we are going to bring the greatest fight in the history of this country to the Democrat establishment in this state. So they better buckle the fuck up. But before I do, we got to do some gut check. We got to do some soul searching, some rat killing right here in our own camp first. Maybe some of y'all were hiding. Maybe some of you make money off of what was going on in Minneapolis. And I'm talking to Fox News. And they could have me on or not have me on. Doesn't much matter to me. Same way I don't care about having my face in the Star Tribune. I don't really much care about being on Fox. That's why I got my own podcast. That's why I deal with War Room, where they talk about real shit. They talk about real ideas, real cultural dynamics. I'll go to places where they let you talk about it in a real way. I'm not concerned or impressed with the superficial. It's the fastest way to kill a soul, is being impressed by the superficial. My point is, some of y'all were making money off of what happened in my community in 2020. Not only Black Lives Matter. Oh, let's not play that game. Oh, yeah, Black Lives Matter was grifting. They made millions of dollars, and they continue to make millions of dollars off of the death of Black folks, and then they push a sneaky political agenda under the radar, or really not under the radar anymore. It's right up in your face. Yeah, that's true. But there's somebody else who makes money when a 38th in Chicago goes up in flames, and that would be you, Fox News. That would be you, Alpha News. You get all of the conservatives and the Christians who are glued to their phones and to their TV screens because they feel that something's wrong, but they're not really brave enough to go down there. But and I say that for a reason. I'm not trying to be demeaning or disrespectful. What I'm saying is, I think it's quite clear what I'm saying. If we want to save the country now, we're gonna have to go down there. There ain't gonna be no. There can be no more third-party viewing. There can be no more remote viewing. We got to go down there. So who amongst you is ready to go? Because now I won the Senate primary, and now we're going to see where everybody is. Now we're going to see how everybody really feels about this country, the survival of this country. I'm going down there. I can go down there. You could come with me. I could bring you down there. And over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to start to show you just how relevant my cultural and community roots are in this city. I'm going to start to show you. Don't listen to the white liberals who came from the liberal arts universities and academia. Don't let them tell you what Minneapolis is like down in the neighborhood. I'm going to show you, because I come from that neighborhood, and that's another reason they're scared of my candidacy, because they know exactly where I come from. They know exactly the type of individuals I grew up around. They know exactly what holds the key to the mentality of the Black communities all across this country, let alone in our own. But we're going to go there. We're on our way. The question is, will you come too? And if you can find that bravery to come down to the inner city and say, I don't know what they've been telling y'all about Republicans, but we're not racist. We want you in the Republican Party. We want you to be able to own your own business. We want you to be off of welfare and to be able to rise up in this country and have access to the American dream. We want all that. How do we get there is the question. Well, how the Democrats have told you they're going to get you there ain't working. Ever try a little bit of free market enterprise? We want you to have access to capital. We would much rather you have access to capital to start your own businesses than offshore our labor and our manufacturing to our national mortal enemy, the Chinese Communist Party. I mean, the contradiction gets so crazy in here, it's actually hard for me to stomach, let alone articulate. We actually live in this strange culture where we talk about the threat of communism and Marxism, yet we're willing to let our Black communities die under a Marxist and communist regime while we watch through our televisions and cell phones. And in the end, we we complain like we actually have a problem with the communism, yet we're okay with shipping all of our essential manufacturing and labor to a Chinese Communist Party. Am I getting through to you yet? You starting to understand why it was so dangerous to the establishment for me to win a United States Senate primary? But guess what? 80,000 of you Minnesotans out there get it. You understand. You get that passion and fire I bring to this shit. You appreciate it. And I appreciate you for having the courage to be able to hear it and to be able to understand it. I appreciate you. I appreciate you 80,000 out there that voted yesterday. And I received the messages. I received the feedback. You can see it. I try to repost some of it on my social media. People saying, we need individuals like you there in D.C. We may not like we may not like your delivery all the time. We may not agree with everything you say, but you're going to say what you think. And you damn sure aren't going to sell out. And that's what we need more than anything. You can keep allowing these polite, polished, puppet politicians to represent you if you want to, but then you don't have a right to complain about the condition of the country. That's all I'm saying. Hey, this is a representative republic, a constitutional republic. We have representative. You can choose to vote for whoever you want to. You can choose to let anybody you want represent you. That is your constitutional right. It's built into the fabric of what our government structure is. But me personally, I'm just not going to listen to you complain about the condition of the country if you keep choosing sellouts and puppet, polite, polished, mealy-mouthed politicians to represent your interests. I just can't hear your complaints. And when you allow Minneapolis and St. Paul, inner cities or metro area, or let's say more specifically, black communities, when you let Marxists and Satanists take over our inner cities, you are creating the revolving door for them to steal elections from you every 2 to 4 years. Somebody tell me that I'm lying. Somebody tell me it's not true. Somebody tell me that Donald Trump didn't open up a door, didn't carve a path for now 51% of black men to be polling for a Republican presidential candidate, and they tell you that his style of politics makes him unelectable. It makes him unelectable to who? See, because all of the metrics tell us that black people are moving towards Donald Trump and his brand of politics. So who exactly are you saying he's unelectable for? You're saying he's unelectable for white suburban women. That's what you're saying. And that brings me to my last and final point. I'll save the anti-Semitic claims for Friday's episode. We'll talk about it again with Professor Penn. We don't need to talk about that because me and Professor Penn went over that at length in the last Hebrews episode. So we don't even have to talk about that one. But let me bring you to my last and final point here for the evening. My last and final point is this. The cultural war is really between men and women. And now the first headline that breaks after I shock the political world and win a United States primary with my extreme far-right rhetoric. Former basketball player Royce White wins Minnesota U.S. Senate primary and having said, women are mouthy. Women are mouthy. You can't say women are mouthy. You can have no broad cultural critique of women whatsoever. Now, let's talk about this. I mean, I've talked about it before, but again, some of you might be new. If a woman says men are dumb, men are so dumb. Men are a headache. Men are a pain in the ass. You know how women talk. Women get together and talk about men the same way men get together and talk about women. There's really no difference in that way. Right? Is she talking about all men? Most of the time when women make statements, broad, generalized statements about men, are they talking about every man literally? Of course not. No, they're not talking about every man. They're saying that the men who give them headaches, the men who are a pain in the ass, the men who are dumb, are men. So they're classifying them as men. They're not saying all men. So when I say women have gotten mouthy, there are a lot of women who have gotten mouthy. It's not all women. And what does mouthy even mean? I don't even really believe most people out there know what the word mouthy means. Now let me read you the definition. I want to read it straight from the horse's mouth. So this is called a crisis of education and knowledge. We are living in an epistemological crisis, is what we're living in. It's not funny, but you got to laugh to stop from crying sometimes. Um, the word mouthy means inclined to talk a lot, especially in an impudent way. That's what the word mouthy means. Inclined to talk a lot, especially in an impudent way. Are there mouthy women in our society? I mean, is that extreme? Does that make me a misogynist? Does that make me a bigot? Or I don't even understand what the. I mean, I said it so casually in the clip that they keep playing because to me it's just a matter of fact. There are women who are inclined to talk a lot in an impudent way. Now there are men that I would consider mouthy too. But the question I was asked in the podcast by Steve Bannon was why these liberal media outlets have painted the MAGA movement as a bunch of white Christian men who are only upset and resentful because their women have gotten too mouthy. And my response to that question was, well, number one, women have gotten mouthy. I mean, and that's true. I mean, and furthermore, I mean, the dynamic, when you look at the dynamic of the modern American relationship, the modern American relationship between men and women, you can point to data, let's say the divorce rate, and determine that we're having significant issues between men and women, especially in our relationship, especially in our intimate relationship. So when you talk about white Christian men or men whatsoever, uh, there seems to be a disconnect between them and their partners. That's it. So, and if you're a man, I mean, even if you're not, if you're a man, you're a woman, you're a child, you're older, whatever it is, the cultural sentiment that is conveyed in all of modern mainstream media, television, movies, books, radio, comedy, whatever it is, all of the conventional wisdom expresses that usually the dynamic between men and women in the household, in a marriage, any long-term relationship, is that the man is interpreting the problems of the relationship as being one where the communication is broken between him and the woman, and it feels like the woman is nagging him. Is that not a common motif in American culture, in American media culture, American media, in Hollywood even? Television, whatever it is. Is that not a common cultural sentiment that husbands feel like their wives are nagging them? Mouthy. I mean that is the motif that is widely accepted, but now you can't even say it's like it's not a thing. What they're really saying are men aren't entitled to an opinion if it criticizes or has anything negative to say whatsoever about women, and that's a non-starter. Again, we're not living in reality. If we have brought if women if the political dominance of women is going to result in us having a conversation set where you can make no broad critique about women whatsoever, then this country will die. Take that how you want to, women. And here's and this is the scariest part. There's actually a political elite that has manipulated and misused and misguided and exploited women's discontentment with their political status in order to steal your money as well. Oh, and that is the game. Oh, that is the heart of the game. That is the heart of the whole thing. That women have been manipulated and exploited by a permanent political class. Permanent political class that uses women's desire to have more political power or status in order to distract them from stealing their money. That's the only equality that exists in America. That's the only equality that currently exists in our American political culture is they steal all your shit equally. You men and women, you can fight all you want, just like blacks and whites, just like, any other opposing groups, Christians and Jews and Muslims or whoever. You all can fight all you want to, but the equality that will exist, the equality that will be as sure as the sun will rise, the equality that will be a constant is we will steal all of your shit equally. So go ahead and fight. Keep fighting. Go ahead. Keep fighting. Keep bickering. Keep up with the cultural wedge issues. All you want to. All it gives us cover to steal your shit. And we're going to steal your shit equally. We're going to steal men's shit. We're going to steal women's shit. We're going to steal children's shit. Hell, Social Security is insolvent. We're going to steal all of your shit too. Is it really an attack on women? A broad attack on women to say women have become mouthy? A lot of you women have become mouthy. And if I'm going even further, what I was specifically saying was a lot of you progressive and left-leaning liberal white women have gotten mouthy. That's what I was really saying. And I'm not supposed to be able to say that because supposedly you can't win an election without them. Well, if we can't win elections without a group of people who don't want to start from a good faith conversation or reality, then the country is dead already. And I can't get any more real with you than that. The country is already in peril if we are reliant upon the vote of citizens who don't want to start a conversation from reality and good faith. Men have a lot of problems. I've always said that the crisis of femininity is a failure of masculinity. So men have a ton of problems, most of which in this country or in Western society is that there are a bunch of beta male cuck men who have conceded that any broad cultural critique of women is off limits. And they've teamed up with a political constituency of women, and they've tried to single out, isolate, and persecute, prosecute, execute, smear the character of any of the men who are willing to say, hey, wait a second, hold on. I can't say that my wife is mouthy. It's like going to a marriage. It's like going to the marriage counselor. It's like going to the therapist, the relationship therapist, and you're in there, and the woman says that everything is your fault. I mean, this is a common. I mean, let's just get right down to it. This is a common cultural sentiment. This is a problem, with the modern woman. The modern woman views the world as everything happening to her. And she's been taught that way. That is probably the hallmark of postmodern Marxism coming out of the universities. There's a reason why they're putting more women into the university than ever. They're teaching you that way. That you are the perpetual victim in your own narrative, in your own movie, in your own drama. Then we'll give you Instagram to post about it so you can get the self-gratification and aggrandizement of whatever other citizen out there agrees with you, usually other women who have the same sort of weird victim mentality. And it is a weird mentality. The mentality is if my boyfriend does something and it makes me feel any kind of way, he's wrong. But if he says that something I did makes him feel some kind of way, then it was his actions that made me do it. Now tell me, if you're a woman out there and you feel differently, please put it in the comments. If you're a man out there and you've experienced this, I need you to step up and have some backbone now, or else we're going to lose the country. If you've ever been in a relationship like that where the woman blames you for the things you do and the things that she does, please drop that in the comments. Because I've experienced it myself a number of times just in my short 33 years of being alive. And I've witnessed other people do it in their relationships. This is a problem that we have, in the culture of our women that is being systematically driven into their worldview by our universities, by pop psychology, the culture war between men and women. If women do something wrong, it's on the man. If the man does something wrong, it's obviously on the man. The man is wrong regardless. Now, you can say, they're waiting. I'm not worried about that. You can say, you can say that you can say that it's the man's duty or responsibility to keep such a tight guard on the entire dynamic of the household or relationship that some blame can be rightfully placed on him for both situations. You can say that, but there's got to be a limit. Okay, there's got to be a boundary out there, and that's kind of the whole edifice of this political time we're living in. No boundaries. There are no boundaries. There are no constraints. There's no outer limit. It's just anything goes, free for all. Whatever you think, whatever you thinketh, beeth. That's kind of the world we're living in. There's no reality. Do you think it's by any strange coincidence that the feminist movement has aligned so closely with the transgender movement, where you can create your own reality out of thin air? I'll be there in a minute. Do you think that's a coincidence? It's not a coincidence. This is exactly what happens when you have a movement, a cultural movement, a philosophical movement with no real constraints or boundaries. This is what we have to reel in. Nobody's saying that all women are bad people or all women are anything. There's not a real generalization being made about women at all, other than the universities have strategically, intentionally, systematically shaped the worldview of the feminist movement, which now many women at least casually or loosely affiliate or associate themselves with. And that is an issue. And it's dominating our politics. It's dominating the way that we as Americans and people in the West think about the world and existence and reality. You don't get to have your own reality. You can't say that you're worried about the well-being and prosperity of others, but you live in your own reality. That is an oxymoron. That is contradictory. In order to live in harmony, social harmony, civilized harmony with other people, you can't have your own reality. There's a shared reality. In our shared reality, you have XY and XX chromosomes. That's in our shared reality. In your mind, you may be able to wake up tomorrow and become a unicorn, but I'm not calling you a unicorn. And again, I tell all you men, you better start standing up for yourselves. If I have to lose an election for men to stand up for themselves against this globalist shill, Amy Klobuchar, I will do that. But you better start standing up for yourselves. You better start standing up for yourselves at home. You better start standing up for yourselves in the university. You better start standing up for yourselves in the courts. You better start standing up for yourselves in the churches. You better start standing up for yourselves. And I gave you the prime example. When a woman does something in her relationship, when a woman does something wrong, she says, the man's actions made me do it. Something you did drove my behavior. And even if my behavior may be inappropriate, it was your fault. You are the one. Your actions made me do it. Well, if the man does something, he can never turn around and say, well, your actions made me do it. Your behavior made me do it. What you were saying made me do it. No, if the man does something wrong, it's just because he's a dumb, pain in the ass man. And the fact that we don't see anything wrong with that being the cultural norm is why we have a lot of the problems we have. We're not starting from our house ain't in order. Our house isn't in order. We're not going back to a time when women couldn't vote or women can't speak their mind or women can't be a part of the job force. Nobody's talking about going back to a time like that. At least I'm not. You can't throw that on my jacket. That's not a part of my platform at all. In fact, I have the most, I tend to resonate the most when I'm speaking with women. If you all don't know, most of the Republican Party participation comes from our women in the Republican Party. And I tend to have a really good rapport with the women in the Republican Party. Now, of course, they have different set of cultural values and beliefs than maybe their Democrat counterparts. But the point is, it's not against women. And that's another thing. Why is it that the feminist movement and the women's rights agenda only is only, let's say, is only reserved for women with the same political ideology? Look at how viciously they go after the women that don't agree with them. Look how vicious they go after those women. They talk about them like they ain't shit. If you're a woman who doesn't follow in lockstep with the LGBTQ, or you think that being a housewife and a mom is a good thing, or if you think that maybe women should be somewhat submissive to man in the hierarchy of God's natural order, if you say anything like that, they talk about you like you're not shit. They show you right away the same thing that the liberals show black folks as soon as a black man decides to step off the plantation, run as a Republican, and say he supports Donald Trump. This has been another episode of Please Call Me Crazy, brought to you by Free People Radio, powered by our favorite sponsor, TireGet.com. That's TireGet.com. You have to buy tires from somebody. You might as well buy them from us and help fund the movement, help support the movement. We believe in the freedom of movement. And that's exactly what the establishment wants to take from you now. I'm your host, Royce White, here in the belly of the beast. Now, Minnesota Republican nominee for United States Senate, running against Amy Klobuchar. And there's not a better motif of the hypocrite, the diabolical hypocrisy of the white, affluent, liberal, globalist politician than me versus Amy Klobuchar. And we plan to drive that narrative home because there's so much truth in it. I couldn't even get to it all. If I tried, there's so much deeply rooted in that dynamic. I can't even get to it all. Certainly not in one podcast. But that's why you could come back on Friday. Friday night we'll be at it again. Saturday morning, the Royce White Show. And yes, I have the great privilege to host again for the great Steve Bannon on War Room this Saturday morning as well. So we're going to keep the whole point of my candidacy is to start to deconstruct this narrative that's tightly held together, but built on lies and fallacy. If we can do that, we can save the country. And there is a culture war. I didn't even get to talking about the military-industrial complex and the neocons and globalism and monetary policy, because the first line of attack they're going to use against me, you can already see it, is culture war. Yeah, he might be the first black candidate ever endorsed and nominated by either major party in the history of the state of Minnesota to run for United States Senate. That may be true, but we're never going to mention that. Let's just call him a homophobe and a misogynist and a bigot and an extremist and a conspiracy theorist, a Nazi, a far right-wing populist. Let's call him an anti-Semite. Let's call him whatever we can so people won't listen to what he has to say. But guess what? I'm going directly to you. I'm coming to talk directly to you through this podcast, and eventually I'll be knocking on your door, coming to a theater near you. We're coming. We're bringing the truth. We won't take a single back step. If they were cheating, they should have cheated me, because they have just now allowed one of the most dangerous, young, and when I say dangerous, I mean dangerous to the status quo and the narrative, one of the most dangerous, young, ambitious political activists in this country to walk up on center stage of what is now ground zero for this presidential cycle, for the 2024 presidential cycle. And this is ground zero. Understand, when Governor Tim Walz gets the VP pick, they plan to kick culture war up back in your face to distract you from the monetary and economic policy. That's the whole goal. Look at how Donald Trump talks about the black woman. Look at how weird these white Christians are. And even if you're a black man, you just get lumped in with the white Christians. If you're a black woman, you get lumped in with the white Christians. If you disagree with us, then we'll just lump you in with the white Christians. And that's exactly what the Nazis did to end. You're not a fascist because you want to have a border, because you believe in citizenship, because you believe in having a country. That doesn't make you a fascist or an extremist. What does make you a fascist is if you try and persecute anybody who doesn't agree with you. Prosecute anybody who doesn't agree with you. Talk about killing anybody who doesn't agree with you. And never forget, the Nazis didn't just go after the Jews. It was the Jews first, then it was the Gypsies, then it was the Romani. And after everybody was finished, they went after the Catholics. And when there were no more Catholics, they even went after other Germans. They went after other Germans who just didn't quite agree with them. And that's the track we're on now. It's starting with us MAGA Republicans. But the goal is to eventually make their way to your door, and any little slight deviation you have from the status quo will be enough to see you thrown in prison, like my good friend and mentor, Steve Bannon. We appreciate your viewership and listenership today and in the future. The people are coming. The people are coming. This is going to be an epic, historic 90 days in this United States Senate campaign. We're going to go all around the state, and we need you. We need your participation. The last thing I'll say before we leave, the biggest takeaway from the primary last night was the voter turnout itself. About 196,000 votes on the Republican side. Amy Klobuchar had 300,000 votes herself. We know there are more Republicans in the state than that. We didn't come out to vote. Now, we know there'll be more voters to come out for the presidential race in November. But we have to kick our voter turnout into high gear. And I get the sense, well, we're going to go down there in Minneapolis and flip a third or a third or more of those votes. Well, we're on our way to do that. We're going to go talk to those black and Hispanic working class citizens the way they did down there in the Rio Grande and get those votes to flip. What we have to come to grips with, if we actually have a problem with Marxism and communism and Satanism, because the three are inextricably linked, if we have a problem with those three things, then we need those Christians to vote. You Christians out there, you have an obligation to vote, or you have no right to talk about the perverseness of our society and this country, because it's happening under our watch. If this is a Christian nation, then let it be so. Then we have to step up and vote our values and beliefs. The fight continues. As always, Godspeed.